744 millimeters. That's how much rain fell on Beijing in just 7 days, equivalent to an entire year's rainfall compressed into one terrifying week that transformed China's capital into an aquatic graveyard where 44 people died and 80,000 residents fled for their lives. On July 28, 2025, the Qingshui River didn't just overflow, it executed the residents of the Taishitun Town Elderly Care Center in Miyun District, where 31 trapped elderly people died as floodwaters surged through their windows. Welcome to Earth's Dark Secrets. I'm about to reveal how Beijing's Miyun Reservoir, the city's primary drinking water source, became a 730 million cubic meter death trap that reached levels unseen since 1959, and why China's most advanced flood control systems failed catastrophically when nature delivered precipitation that exceeded every computer model. July 23rd to July 30th, 2025. 7 consecutive days when Beijing's sky became a fire hose aimed directly at the northern mountainous districts of Miyun and Yanqing. Miyun district alone recorded 543.4 millimeters, more than half a year's typical rainfall in a single week. But the real killer wasn't the total amount. It was the concentration. Weather stations recorded rainfall rates that transformed mountain valleys into funnels, channeling unprecedented volumes of water directly toward residential areas that had never experienced anything remotely comparable. The Miyun Reservoir, Beijing's largest drinking water source since 1959, began receiving inflows of 730 million cubic meters. To put that in perspective, that's equivalent to filling 292,000 Olympic swimming pools in less than a week, forcing reservoir operators into an impossible choice: risk dam failure or release controlled floods that would devastate downstream communities. They chose controlled destruction. Massive water releases began cascading downstream, turning the Qingshui River from a manageable waterway into a liquid bulldozer that redrew the geography of entire townships. Monday, July 28, 2025, Putaojuan Village, Miyun District. The Taishitun Town Elderly Care Center housed 79 residents, most of them immobile, dependent on staff assistance for basic survival functions. The facility had been built in 2021 upstream of the Miyun Reservoir, specifically designed to provide residential care for severely disabled elderly residents. When the Qingshui River overflowed at 11:47 a.m., there was no warning, no evacuation sirens, no emergency alerts, no time. Floodwaters surged into the single-story building with the force of a horizontal tsunami, trapping residents who couldn't walk, couldn't swim, and couldn't escape. The building's low-lying location, chosen for accessibility, became a death sentence when water levels rose faster than human evacuation was possible. 48 people were rescued by emergency teams who smashed windows and pulled survivors through glass openings while water continued rising inside the building. Firefighters worked in waist-deep flood water, checking every room, every corner, every hiding place where terrified residents might have sought shelter. 31 people didn't make it out. The victims died not from drowning in a river or lake, but from being trapped inside a building that became a death chamber when China's flood control systems failed to provide adequate warning for the most vulnerable population. The Miyun Reservoir, Beijing's drinking water lifeline since 1959, reached critical capacity as inflows exceeded every historical precedent. 730 million cubic meters of water, equivalent to 6 months of normal inflow, arrived in less than 1 week. The reservoir's overflow systems, designed for typical seasonal variations, became inadequate for the hydrological reality of climate-intensified precipitation events. Dam operators made the controlled release decision that would save the reservoir structure but condemn downstream communities to systematic flooding. Water released from Miyun cascaded through mountain valleys that acted as natural amplifiers, concentrating flow volumes and accelerating flood speeds toward populated areas. The Qingshui River, normally a manageable waterway, became a liquid highway carrying debris, vehicles, and building materials torn from upstream communities directly toward Putaojuan Village and the Taishatun nursing home. Miyun District's geography created a natural flood amplification system that concentrated disaster impact with deadly precision. The area's mountain valleys function as rainfall collectors during normal weather, channeling precipitation toward the Miyun Reservoir through predictable drainage patterns. But during extreme precipitation events, these same valleys become flood funnels that accelerate water speeds and concentrate destructive force. Beijing's emergency response revealed critical gaps in disaster preparedness for extreme weather events. Over 16,000 people had been evacuated from 205 high-risk villages ahead of the disaster, but the nursing home, housing the most vulnerable population, wasn't included in preemptive evacuation protocols. Rescue operations required emergency teams to navigate floodwaters, while simultaneously conducting medical evacuations of immobile elderly residents who couldn't assist in their own rescue. Firefighters spent hours checking submerged buildings for trapped survivors, working in contaminated water that contained sewage, debris, and potential hazardous materials. The communication breakdown was terrible, cell towers were compromised, landline networks were flooded, and emergency radio systems were overwhelmed by simultaneous rescue requests across multiple districts. The financial devastation extended far beyond immediate flood damage. Agricultural areas in Miyun and Yangqing, responsible for supplying fresh produce to Beijing's 21 million residents, were completely destroyed. Crops were flattened, livestock drowned, and irrigation infrastructure was washed away, creating food supply disruptions that would persist for months. Small businesses in affected districts faced total inventory loss. Electronics stores, restaurants, and retail shops saw entire stock destroyed by contaminated floodwater that left behind layers of toxic mud requiring hazardous material cleanup. Property damage reached into the billions of yuan as residential buildings suffered foundation damage from soil saturation that compromised structural integrity in ways that wouldn't become apparent until weeks after the water receded. This disaster shows a 500-year flood event, statistically expected to occur once every 5 centuries, that revealed how Beijing's infrastructure was designed for weather patterns that no longer exist. Climate scientists confirmed that Beijing's drainage systems, reservoir management, and emergency protocols were designed for historical precipitation patterns that assumed gradual seasonal variation rather than extreme concentration events that deliver annual rainfall in single weeks. Municipal engineers now face the impossible challenge of redesigning infrastructure for weather events that have no historical precedent and may become increasingly frequent as global climate patterns continue evolving beyond predictable parameters. 3 weeks after the water receded, Beijing continues discovering infrastructure damage that wasn't visible during the active flooding phase. Underground electrical conduits suffered water infiltration that created delayed failure patterns, systems that appeared functional immediately after the flood but collapsed weeks later when accumulated moisture finally compromised their integrity. Building foundations experienced soil saturation that caused structural settling, detectable only during detailed engineering inspections conducted long after the emergency phase ended. Some buildings that appeared undamaged during the disaster revealed foundation compromise that made them unsafe for occupancy. The nursing home tragedy exposed systematic vulnerabilities in China's elder care infrastructure. 44 deaths from 7 days of concentrated precipitation. 31 elderly people executed by institutional neglect when evacuation protocols designed for gradual flooding proved catastrophically inadequate for rapid onset inundation events. Over 300,000 people affected, discovering that emergency infrastructure calibrated for 20th century weather patterns cannot protect 21st century urban populations from atmospheric extremes that exceed every planning assumption. As global climate systems continue destabilizing beyond predictive models, megacities worldwide face Beijing's existential question. How many lives is society willing to sacrifice to maintain infrastructure designed for weather patterns that no longer exist? The answer, as Beijing discovered between July 23rd and 30th, 2025, might be as simple as 744 millimeters falling faster than the Earth can absorb it, and infrastructure can manage it. Thanks for watching Earth's Dark Secrets, where we expose the hidden realities behind our planet's most devastating disasters. If this investigation revealed something the mainstream media won't tell you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us uncover the stories that authorities don't want told. Hit the bell so you never miss our in-depth analysis of the disasters that reveal our planet's dark truths.